Hollywood, 1952. Roger Eden sat at the piano in a private rehearsal studio, waiting for Judy Garland to arrive. As her vocal coach and musical arranger for over 15 years, Roger had guided Judy through some of her most iconic performances. But today was different. Today he would hear something that would change his understanding of everything. When Judy walked in and began warming up, Roger immediately noticed something wrong with her voice. Not the usual inconsistencies he'd learned to work around. This was fundamental damage. The instrument he had helped shape and protect was breaking. What happened in that rehearsal room revealed a truth that Roger kept mostly private until his final years. The pharmaceutical abuse and relentless exploitation hadn't just damaged Judy's body and mind. They had permanently altered the voice that made her famous. This is the story of the day Judy Garland's voice changed forever and what it meant for the woman trapped inside that failing instrument. Roger Edens first met Judy in 1935 when she was just 13 years old and newly signed to MGM. He was a young composer and arranger who recognized immediately that this child had something extraordinary. Her voice wasn't just technically proficient. It carried emotional weight that seemed impossible from someone so young. Roger became her mentor, protector when he could be, and witness to her entire trajectory through Hollywood's studio system. In those early years, Roger worked with Judy to develop her distinctive style. He taught her phrasing techniques, helped her understand how to use her natural vibrato, showed her how to tell stories through songs rather than just singing notes. They spent countless hours together in rehearsal studios, and Roger watched as this talented child became one of the most remarkable vocalists in Hollywood. But he also watched as the studio system began its systematic destruction of the person behind that voice. What made Roger's perspective unique was his technical understanding of vocal mechanics combined with years of intimate knowledge of how Judy's voice worked. He knew exactly what her vocal range should be, understood which notes were easy for her and which required effort, could hear subtle changes that others might miss. This expertise made him acutely aware when things started going wrong. The changes began gradually in the mid-1940s. Roger noticed that Judy's voice would sometimes sound strained during sessions that should have been easy for her. Her control would waver in passages she had previously handled effortlessly. The warm quality that defined her tone would occasionally turn brittle or harsh. At first, Roger attributed this to fatigue from the demanding schedule MGM imposed. But as the pattern continued and worsened, he recognized something more serious was happening. Roger understood that the pharmaceutical regimen controlling Judy's life was affecting her voice. The stimulants dried her vocal cords. The sedatives altered her breath control. The constant weight fluctuations changed the physical mechanics of how sound resonated in her body. He tried to compensate through technical adjustments, choosing keys that worked better for her damaged voice, creating arrangements that hid her increasing limitations. But he was fighting a losing battle against systematic physical destruction. That day in 1952 crystallized everything Roger had been observing and dreading. Judy arrived at the rehearsal studio, looking exhausted as usual. They were preparing material for her comeback attempt after being fired from MGM. Roger started them with simple vocal exercises, standard warm-ups they had done thousands of times. But when Judy sang, Roger heard something that made his heart sink. Her voice cracked on a note that should have been easy. She pushed harder, trying to force the sound, and her voice broke completely. She stopped, frustrated and frightened, and said words Roger never forgot. "It's gone, isn't it?" They finally broke it. Roger tried to reassure her, suggested they take a break and try again later, but he knew she was right. Something fundamental had changed in her voice. The years of abuse, the pharmaceuticals, the relentless demands, the lack of proper vocal rest, all of it had accumulated into permanent damage. The instrument that had made her famous and kept her employable was compromised in ways that couldn't be fully repaired. What made this realization devastating was understanding what it meant for Judy's future. Her voice was her survival tool, the skill that gave her value in an industry that had used her up and discarded her. Damage to that voice didn't just affect her artistry. It threatened her ability to earn a living, to maintain relevance, to justify her existence in a system that measured human worth by profitable output. Roger watched Judy process this understanding, saw the fear in her eyes, and felt powerless to offer real comfort. But here's what Roger also understood. Despite the damage, Judy's voice retained something that technical perfection could never achieve. The wear and tear, the breaks and cracks, they added a quality of vulnerability and authenticity that made her later performances emotionally devastating. She learned to sing around her limitations, to use the damage itself as an expressive tool. Her voice became a testament to survival, and audiences responded to that truth even when they didn't consciously recognize what they were hearing. Roger continued working with Judy through the 1950s and into the 1960s, adapting his arrangements to accommodate her changing voice. He became expert at selecting material that worked with her limitations rather than against them. He created orchestrations that supported her when her voice faltered. He helped her learn techniques that compensated for damaged vocal cords and diminished range. This required creativity and constant adjustment, turning each performance into a careful negotiation with a failing instrument. What troubled Roger was watching Judy push herself beyond what her damaged voice could sustain. She would take bookings that required multiple performances, knowing she couldn't handle the strain. She would attempt songs that were too demanding for her current vocal condition. Roger understood why. She needed the money, needed to prove she could still perform, needed the validation that only audiences could provide. But each time she pushed too hard, she caused further damage that compounded over time. Roger also witnessed how the vocal damage affected Judy psychologically. Her voice had been her identity since childhood, the thing that made her special and valuable. As it deteriorated, she felt herself disappearing. Roger saw her confidence erode, watched her become increasingly anxious before performances, observed the desperate measures she took to force her voice to work. The psychological toll of losing her instrument while still needing it to survive created vicious cycles that accelerated her decline. The recordings from Judy's later career provide documentation of what Roger observed directly. If you listen chronologically to her work, you can hear the voice changing, the damage accumulating, the compensatory techniques becoming more necessary. Roger heard these changes in real time, working with her as she struggled to maintain the ability to perform. Each session revealed new limitations, required new adaptations, reminded both of them of what had been lost. What makes Roger's testimony particularly valuable is his technical expertise combined with deep personal knowledge of Judy and her voice. He could identify specifically what was damaged and how, explain the mechanisms through which pharmaceutical abuse destroyed vocal tissue, describe the ways that stress and exhaustion affected breath support and control. His account transforms vague notions of Judy's struggles into concrete understanding of physical destruction. Roger also spoke about his own complicity in the system that damaged Judy's voice. As her vocal coach and arranger, his job was to maximize her performances regardless of the cost to her long-term vocal health. He helped her push through when she should have been resting. He created arrangements that allowed her to perform when medical professionals might have recommended silence. He enabled the continuation of a career that was actively destroying the instrument it depended on. When Judy died in 1969, Roger mourned not just the loss of a person he had known and cared about for decades, but the waste of one of the most remarkable voices he had ever encountered. He understood that her voice could have lasted much longer, could have developed and matured naturally, if the studio system hadn't systematically destroyed it through exploitation and pharmaceutical abuse. That knowledge made her death feel like the culmination of a decades-long crime. In his later reflections, Roger described Judy's voice as both triumph and tragedy. Triumph because, even damaged, it remained powerful enough to move audiences profoundly. Tragedy because the damage was preventable, caused by systems that valued short-term profit over human preservation. He spoke about her voice with the sadness of someone who had watched something beautiful being deliberately destroyed and had been powerless to stop it.